Let's talk about the main things to do once you reach Endgame in Lost Ark. Once you've reached level 50 and have arrived at Vern Castle, the endgame content can begin. First thing I would recommend is setting the blue waypoint in the center of the castle to your hometown by going over to it and interacting. This way, when you're off in different regions, you can use the Song of Return to get back here instantly without needing to sail back across the ocean. Quick orientation at the endgame area. Predominantly, you're over here to run content and over here to work on your gear. And there's places to shop for certain things or access your stash throughout the city. You can run endgame loops from various cities throughout the world, though personally I just think Vern Castle is epic and it's always very populated, which is kind of fun. You'll have gear score 250 or higher by finishing the campaign, which is needed to start the first Chaos Dungeon. Talk to an NPC here at the Chaos Dungeon entrance to unlock access. These are straight up mobbing dungeons with hundreds of enemies. These dungeons will, however, drop blue rarity, gear score 302 weapons and armor pieces from their enemies, and you can run them twice a day. After your 2 daily runs, you should have a full set of 302 gear and can now begin Guardian raids. This is because the lowest minimum gear score to enter is indeed 302 exactly, so you do need the Chaos Dungeon gear pieces in order to enter the first Guardian fight. Talk to this NPC next to the Guardian board to get access, and Guardian raids are all about hunting down a single boss in a large arena and can also be done twice a day. Using Chaos Dungeons and Guardian raids, you'll start increasing your gear score because both offer gear upgrade materials and crystals as rewards. You'll use these rewards to upgrade your equipment and will no longer be finding better gear straight off the ground. As you collect these crystals, you will come to this vendor with the hammer icon to increase the gear score of your pieces by a process called honing. This is often referred to as Enchanting because of other MMORPGs. If you want more details on how the actual honing process works and which materials are used for what, I do have a separate video on that, link in the description. Put plainly though, gear score represents the power of your character's base stats. Your attack power, health pool, defenses, all of these go up as you increase your gear score by taking weapons and armor to this merchant and honing them to make them sword +1, sword +2, etc. It makes the gear more powerful and increases the gear score. Similarly, the quality of endgame gear represents the increase in bonus stats. Quality is super important on weapons because it gives more of the additional damage stat. This is decently important on jewelry as well because it gives bonuses to those substats that really round out your build and make it feel better to play. Getting jewelry with substats you want and high quality is a big upgrade to the build. And then quality on armor is not much of a priority, or at least it's the smallest priority to get high quality on because it only gives small increases to defenses. Each piece of your gear has an item level, and then your gear score is the average item level across your gear. So to reach gear score 600, for example, your weapon and all of your armor pieces need to be +15. Side note that jewelry does not increase gear score. Jewelry is the more RNG side of the gear system and can be used to give more interesting bonus stats as well as activate engravings. Engravings are powerful passive bonuses or detriments, but for gear score specifically, you're focused on the left side of the inventory to hone your gear. That's what unlocks new content, by meeting new gear score thresholds. Jewelry, along with this ability stone slot, is more about build customization and stat refinement. And by jewelry being the more RNG side, I mean that while gear is upgraded in a linear fashion, with jewelry you're just looking for better drops that you'd want to use. For example, getting jewelry with bonus stats you want, with the engravings you want, and with high quality is going to take a lot of lucky RNG to find that drop. There's 6 different bonus stats, it will only roll with 2. There's tons of engravings, it will roll with only a handful. And quality is anywhere from 1 to 100. So getting jewelry that lands nicely for your character on all 3 of those randomization axes will not happen overnight. Also, should mention that in the endgame there are different prefixes for jewelry. For example, dark energy earrings. And you can only have 1 dark energy earring at a time. The other earring has to be something other than the dark energy prefix. So what should you focus on first with jewelry? If you have a class-specific engraving that really elevates your character, then that's probably your first goal. Work out engravings to strive for so that you start activating those powerful engraving effects and your character starts feeling like it has a build versus just being a character that hit the endgame. Then you'd want jewelry that has those engravings along with the desired bonus stats you're after, like crit chance or agility, for example. And regardless of gear score, you'll always be looking to improve your jewelry or find jewelry to keep for a second or third character. Back onto the gear score side of things though, once each piece of your gear is at +2, you'll have high enough gear score to enter the first Abyss dungeon. Entrance is located over here. You will need to have completed more of the story around Vern, however. These dungeons have short mobbing areas and then move into more mechanically intricate boss fights that have things like full party wipe mechanics if not done correctly. This is the content that made me fall in love with Lost Ark. I hope it does for you as well. This is weekly content, and in the beta used the 3 per week per character model that all the other regions had at the time, but changes in the Korean version might be for us as well, where it's actually only once a week per character, but you get extra rewards and raw gold. Anyway, as you complete Abyss raids, you'll get some Abyss merchant materials. You'll come here to this vendor in order to use those materials and buy your first purple set gear pieces. This is more powerful than blue gear in terms of base numbers, but also provides a very strong set bonus on top of that. Initially, this will also be back to the base 302 gear, and your gear score might be much higher than that at this point, so it might seem like a downgrade or a material dump to catch this gear back up. But actually, you can very cheaply transfer the honing level of your blue gear over to your new purple set gear, 1-for-1, back at the hammer vendor, making this a straight upgrade and no need to re-hone your new gear. I have a separate video going over that transferring process if you want to see how it all works. Link is also in the description. So once you have a full set of purple Abyss gear, you're going to be using that to push into the second page of Chaos Dungeons, the second page of Guardian Raids, and ultimately the second page of Abyss Dungeons. As far as we know, the second page of Abyss Dungeons and Guardian Raids will be the highest levels of endgame content we'll have. So you could call that the pinnacle content of our Western release on launch. But that will only be for 2 or 3 months maybe, when more endgame content will open up. The first 2 pages of these endgame activity sheets are part of the Tier 1 endgame content, and Lost Ark in Korea and Russia, for example, is all the way up at Tier 3, along with having crazy extra raids and other stuff. So this isn't all there is, it's just all there is for the launch window. While you're working on pushing Abyss Dungeons, the Abyss Merchant materials from the second area of Abyss Dungeons are different from the first area. You will exchange these ones for the orange legendary armor set pieces, which there are 2 different sets. So you'll pick the one with the better set bonuses for your build, and then transfer your honing level again, this time from purple to orange. That's then the highest rarity set in our initial Tier 1 endgame. At that point, you're rounding out your gear score by getting it to +15 on each piece. This will be gear score 600 and what will be needed to progress the game once Tier 2 endgame comes out in a few months after release. The endgame expansions will have more story continents and endgame content, but you can only start that process on a character if you have gear score 600. You'll then restart the whole process again by doing early Chaos Dungeons in Tier 2 to get this time 802 gear, succeeding your existing gear into that, and then honing upwards and onwards again. That's all down the line, but I wanted to mention it because there isn't a huge reason to go beyond +15 at the initial endgame. You can push it all the way to +20, but doing so requires a lot of gold and star materials, which honestly I feel would be much better spent bringing up a secondary character up to +15, so you have more than one character at that +15 threshold and ready to start the next endgame tier. This is versus one character at +20 or something whose gear gets instantly replaced as soon as the next continent is released. This is why I strongly advised against spending money on upgrade materials in the cash shop video, because Tier 2 uses entirely different upgrade materials, and then Tier 3 uses a third set of materials. So investing real money into Tier 1 characters and materials to max them out or something is sort of useless, because in a few months you'll pick up better gear off the floor in the first Tier 2 Chaos Dungeon. For us in Tier 1 though, to round out the video, early endgame for the western regions, we've covered in this video what's going to be our gameplay loop for endgame specific content to have on a routine farm. Daily Chaos Dungeons and Guardian Raids with weekly Abyss Dungeons, using the materials of all of them to craft Abyss set pieces and keep honing those set pieces to increase gear score. This is how you gain access to higher and higher levels of content across all the pillars of the endgame. At the same time, you'll be looking for higher quality pieces of the same rarity to transfer your honing level 2 to thus gain better bonus stats, as well as constantly looking for better jewelry with good engraving effects and substats. There's other activities to do, of course, like a solo tower dungeon you keep pushing levels on over time, entire other continents with more story, daily and weekly quests with various other rewards, but this is just the basics to get you started, get your gear score going, and understand the full gear score progression of our initial Tier 1 endgame. I really hope this was helpful for taking your first steps into Lost Ark's endgame. We'll see you next time.